Hello, and welcome to this new session of the Lunchtime Reboot, hosted by xMinds. Focus today on how do we invest energy and time we often don't have in having a support network. So the power of peer support and the necessity really of peer support, the need for finding other parents of autistic kids and neurodivergent kids that can be friends and can lend a shoulder to cry on sometimes, but especially an ear to listen, and for us to do that for them as well. So welcome everyone. I want to start off by asking you all a very simple question, and I invite you to write it in the chat on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being not very supported and 5 being very supported. How supported do you currently feel how supported by other autism parents do you currently feel? Do you have friends or acquaintances, or do you belong in any networks that where there are other autism parents? Obviously, xMinds is one of them, and it's a great resource. And I encourage you all to check out their monthly meetups because they have several and focused on different ages and different stages of our kids. But yeah, what would you say? 1 to 5, with 1 being the lowest and 5 being, the highest, the most supported. 4, 5. 5, that's great. Oh, that's fantastic. Maybe you don't. I mean, nothing that I'm going to tell you today is going to be new or something that you haven't heard before. I still think it's very valuable to remind ourselves often of the need to invest a little bit to be able to feel the support of other parents who may be in a similar situation to yours. So let's just arrive. I invite you to place your feet on the ground, whether you're standing up or sitting down, to just feel your feet touching the ground, and then just to breathe, paying attention to the sensations of the breath coming in through your nose and out through your mouth, and see if maybe on the out breath anything relaxes, and if it doesn't, that's okay too, but sometimes it happens. So we breathe in and we breathe out. And sometimes our shoulders come down, or we realize that we've had them up here. So this next 45 minutes are for you. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here and to reflect about some of these issues, to give yourself the time to do that. Denise just said, it's the non-autistic parents that I don't feel supported by. Absolutely. And that can be a real struggle depending on our social environment. So how many of the non-autistic families do we need to, or do we interact with on a day-to-day basis or on a weekly basis? What's the ratio there? And this is interesting. This is interesting because having an autistic kid does sometimes lead you to change, or let's say open up your social support network. And it can be a gain, not just a loss. Okay, so I think you probably know me by now. I'm a parent coach, and I'm especially a mindfulness teacher, and I'm very, very focused on our own journey as parents and the impact it has on us and our well-being when we are parenting a neurodivergent child. And I am the mom to my son Adrian, who is just about to turn 15 and has a combined diagnosis of autism ADHD, and actually also language processing disorder. So what's a support network? It is a group of parents who understand autism and raising a child with autism, and or being autistic yourself, which obviously does happen as well. But what's most important, it's that they understand it because they've lived it, or they are living it. It's that lived experience that can be really, really crucial and make a huge difference. That does not mean that people who don't have a direct connection to autism, especially as parents, can't give you support and empathy and lots of understanding. Absolutely, they can. But there is sometimes a need for being able to express yourself in a way where you don't feel like you're having to translate your experience for somebody who doesn't have that experience. Even if our children and their profiles and our parenting journey can be extremely different, within the same diagnosis and within the same parenting journey. It can be formal. So xMinds is an example of where you get, let's say, pretty well-established support groups within the ages of an organization that was set up many years ago and does excellent work supporting parents. It can also be informal. So WhatsApp chats, coffee meetups, text chains. What's really amazing is how, as parents, compared to 20, 30 years ago, we don't have to be isolated in terms of our location, where we live, because a lot of this actually happens online. And it really needs to be a safe space to share, to listen, to be listened to, and also to reflect. And some people would say also to learn, but the learning piece is not the main, let's say, objective. Or I would say sometimes we come to create support networks with other parents that have attended seminars or workshops or whatever, but a support group is there really to support rather than just to exchange information. I don't really need to say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. It's crucial. It's first of all, it reduces feelings of loneliness and isolation, which are super common for autism parents. And the idea is realizing, I'm not the only one. There's a lot of people in my situation. There's a lot of people who are having this parenting journey, and I don't need to feel like I'm doing it alone. Even if, in practical terms, we are doing it alone, as in alone or with partners, but obviously we're ultimately responsible for our own parenting journey. But it's so crucial to know that we're not alone, and that what we experience does not necessarily mean that we're doing it wrong, especially when we're facing challenges, because other parents are also facing challenges and also having similar thoughts and maybe feelings. It can offer, and it should offer, practical tips and strategies in the real world. So, what does this look? Oftentimes when we go to more formal learning events, you get the theory and you might get case studies and sort of practical ideas, but it's great having a sounding board with another mom or dad who might have tried something, and to get the feedback and the information about how that actually looked, in real life, as opposed to on a book or on a PowerPoint slide. And it provides emotional validation, because again, we're not the only ones, and we're not the only ones thinking these thoughts, but we're also not alone in having these feelings, which can sometimes be extremely difficult to manage, because oftentimes they're very contradictory. We have tremendous love for our children, but sometimes we are absolutely at our, at the end of our tether with a particular problem, a particular behavior, a particular challenge. So being able to hold all that and to express all that, sometimes with other peers who can understand you, with very little background explanation needed, is absolutely invaluable. There are benefits for us as parents, and there are also benefits for kids of us having peer support, having other autistic or autism parent support. For us, it's again information sharing, signposting, gathering information about local services, online stuff. It's usually invaluable. Coping strategies for stress and burnout, we can oftentimes, just by talking about it, we can sort of sometimes be helped, but also help other people who might be going through something very similar. And venting is really important. Just, sharing, and sometimes we need to dump it all out. So there is value in doing that. And obviously there's value in having a community that can hold space for that. Being listened to is so cathartic. Even if there are no solutions as such, or even if the people who are listening to you can't give you the solution, the whole issue of emotional support and empathy without judgment, but also empathy, what I call the shortcut empathy. Again, oftentimes with my autism moms and dads, I'll say this is how I'm feeling, this is what's happening. And I don't have to give too much information because they get it. They just get it. Celebrating wins together is really important too. Oftentimes, and some people have said to me, I don't want to be in a support group because it's all about complaining and venting and like dumping. And it's important to make space for celebrating small, progress, advances, big and small, not just the big ones. There are also benefits for our kids and for our families as a whole. We tend to be more resilient, especially emotionally, when we are supported. And so again, if we feel better, or if we feel like we have a place to go to with our cares and our concerns, then we're less likely to act out in frustration at home. It's obvious, but oftentimes we don't necessarily prioritize it. There's so many demands on our time and our energy. We feel less isolated, which means that, again, there are better outcomes for children because there can be opportunities for our children to meet other peers if we are hanging out with other autism parents. Again, this is not to say that this is always easy or that this is always successful. From the point of view of socializing for both our children and ourselves, but it is a possibility. And it strengthens autism advocacy, which I think is also a really interesting point. So when parents unite, usually there are better resources, and the history of autism as a diagnosis and the whole process of reading really phenomenal books about this last year, it just kind of dawned on me how much of where we are today is really because of autism parents advocating, but advocating in organized, in an organized manner, rather than just, family here and a family there. So there are barriers, of course there are, and some of these I'm sure you will be absolutely, you'll be like, yes, that's me. I'm feeling too busy, exhausted to reach out. We just don't have the time. I put that at the end, but to be honest, I think that's quite close to feeling exhausted and or busy. Sometimes we feel like it's another thing on the to-do list, like we need to shoehorn it in and we just can't do it. Or we would rather just, veg in front of the TV if we're particularly exhausted. Because socializing, even when it's for support, does take a bit of investment in time and in energy, so there might be a fear of being judged, or assuming that we will not find people that we kind of click with, that their families will be different, or their kids' profiles will be different, or the circumstances, and so that fear of not fitting in, basically, not knowing where to look, not knowing where to start, and also bad experiences from the past, with groups that just didn't work out for you. So in terms of getting started, some ideas. I think starting small is crucial, and maybe continuing small as well, so that, again, this doesn't become another sort of big project that we need to do, So one conversation, one coffee, one message. I think being very clear about what you want from the group or from the experience of getting support. Oftentimes parents go in through the information gate, the information avenue. It's like, well, I need information, so I'm just going to sign up to this, and all I want is information. So reflecting on, yes, information obviously is crucial, but reflecting on whether you might be sometimes sort of, using information as a way to cover up a deeper emotional need for connection with other people in a similar situation to yours. You don't have to share everything ever, and you don't have to share it right away. And it's important not to pressure ourselves to, if we do belong to a group, or if we are sort of on the outskirts of a group, we're kind of looking in, to not feel like we're pressuring ourselves about, I need to be very active, or I need to share a lot, or I need to give a lot of advice, or, post a lot of information. It's okay to try different groups until you find a good fit. I don't think it's not just okay. I think it's necessary. It's going to be rare to find, to connect to people and to click with people. I mean, if you do first time around, that's fantastic, but that's unlikely to happen. Sometimes finding a group that's focused on a particular issue or a type of profile that matters to you, that is obviously very important to the reality of your kid, can be also a good starting point. And again, that might be more linked to, well, I'm trying to get information. That's fine. And again, online versus in person. Some people find it easier to do it online. You can do it from home, more kind of, let's say there's more privacy, there's more convenience, logistically. But some people need the in-person kind of buzz, or the sense of being in a room with other people. So there's no right or wrong way to do this. Once you do have some people, how do you keep going? Because again, oftentimes we sign up for things and then just kind of falls off our radar because we have so many other things going on. I think it's important to realize that you can only get in as much as you're willing to put in. So being supportive and open for other people, not just when you need help. Giving attention and being a listener is actually very nurturing. It's very nurturing as well. Respecting different parenting approaches. This is quite a big one, because oftentimes we might not have exactly the same values, but that doesn't mean to say that you can't get along with people and that you can't share honestly and openly. But I would say that it is also quite important to be very clear about, is this group, are the sort of general, let's say, values and approaches to autism, are they along, the lines that I am on? Do I resonate with what they're saying about autism? Is it a group that has a view of neurodiversity, that is very respectful, that isn't just focused on, normalizing kids, that sort of thing. Again, that's for everyone to feel at ease with, but I think it's just very important to put it on the table, because oftentimes people have bad experiences because they are in a group where the values of the majority of people, whether it's with regards to parenting styles and approaches, or whether it's regards to how autism is actually viewed, are just not common to them. And that's just going to make it really difficult. And it can actually be the opposite of what it should be. It can be a source of stress and conflict, unnecessary conflict. We've got enough to fight for as it is. So I think it's very important to try to steer clear of groups where we feel like we're having to fight for our views, especially when it comes to our kids' diagnosis and our kids' let's say, future. So sharing, but not dumping indiscriminately, or not only dumping, but also being able to receive other people's dumps, in the sense of venting and also information. Celebrating. So what I said before about the small and the big wins, I think there's a very interesting point here from an emotional management point of view, or emotional awareness point of view, which is it's very easy to fall into the comparison trap, especially when you know people better and you know their kids better. And so when they're celebrating their kids' kind of advances in a certain area, you might feel a bit like, oh, well, I don't see my kid maybe progressing as much as I would like them to in this particular domain. And that can be triggering. So again, that doesn't mean to say that you need to pull away. You might need to temporarily. That's the other thing. Sometimes we dip in and out, and there are self-preservation reasons for that, that you just either don't have the time, don't have the bandwidth, there are many changes going on, or you are being triggered by other people's experiences. Not so much the values, because I think if you're being triggered by other people's values, then you're in the wrong group, But it's very much like, well, if somebody's having a really good run and you're not in your parenting journey, then maybe if it's triggering for you, maybe you take a little break. No hard feelings, So I think just to kind of wrap it up, parenting a neurodivergent child, an autistic child, it can be challenging socially, very challenging. I think our families, our extended families, can actually be a great source of stress, but they can also be a great source of support. But again, I think in this particular instance, we're talking about getting support from people that you're not related to, because I think that there is, there's just a lot of emotional baggage that comes from being related to someone, or a very long-standing friend, especially when they do not have a neurodivergent child, because in their best, with the best of intentions, they might offer advice or, give you passive judgment, or let's say evaluation on something that's happening. And it's very, very easy to feel judged, misunderstood, and therefore to then feel isolated. Like, okay, even if I'm in a room full of people, nobody really understands what I'm going through. So a supportive network of parents can really make a difference. And I would say that it's not a luxury, it's a lifeline. But it is true that it does require a bit of investment. With the sort of theme of connection is healing, connection, when it's based very much on self-awareness, what do I need and what am I willing to give to others? So what do I need to take from others? Let's say, what can I give to others? Then it can be very, very healing. When we're not very clear about what we want, or when we are expecting other people to give us something that they actually can't give us because they don't see parenting an autistic kid in the same way that we do, or because their experiences are very, 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 very different to ours, then it might not be that healing. It actually can be triggering, or it can make us feel even more isolated. So this is why I'm saying connection is healing, as long as we are very clear about what we want and what we can give. So homework. And think of a person or a group that you could reach out to this week, whether it's someone new or fairly new, or whether it's someone or a group that you are aware of, but maybe you haven't kind of been in touch with for a while. And if you don't know where to start, go to the xMinds calendar, because there are several. I think there's weekly support groups for various themes and kind of profiles. You can think or just write down a small step that you can take to grow or strengthen your support network if you already have it. If you feel absolutely fine with the way you have your support network at this point in time, then don't do anything. This is just an idea in case you feel like, well, I've been attending this group, or I've been in touch by text with this group of moms, but it's gone a bit quiet. Let's maybe go for a coffee. Let me propose that we meet up, or whatever, and then, in the end, and I know this is the hardest bit, we do have to give it a little bit of time and energy, just a little bit, but it won't happen on its own. These kinds of things never happen on their own and automatically. Okay, so that's me. Today was a very simple and straightforward chat, which is all about reminding you to check in with yourselves about where you're at in terms of how much support you receive from peers, and whether there's anything you can do to improve on that. And if you would like to get my 4-part audio series, which is completely free, you can just go to my website, which is magüimoreno.com, resources, and get it. And that's very much focused on self-care, but self-care as it kind of depends on you more individually.